What's up, y'all? Shane G, Midwest Coast Podcast. We're skipping intros this week. Shout out to Seawood. He's not here this week. Here's what I want to talk about. This might be a relatively quick episode as well, but I got some things that I have to get off my chest as far as who we really consider to be heroes in our country. Now, let me just paint a picture for you before I bring up any names. If you knew somebody who directly or supported the efforts to kill hundreds of thousands of people, would that person be considered a hero to you? Just one question. If somebody advocates for the killing of hundreds of thousands of people, is that a hero? Another question. How come if I as an individual were to kill one person, I would go to jail for quite some time, possibly for the rest of my life, for killing one person? However, if decisions that I make lead to the deaths of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, does that make me more moral because I didn't actually pull the trigger? Or does that make me less moral because I'm using arguments and I'm using actual power to ensure that all of these people are dead? Just asking. I'm just asking. Because I know if you hire somebody to kill somebody else, you didn't pull the trigger either, but you can still go to prison for that. So if you were to hire somebody or hire a group or be a part of an organization that contributes to the deaths of, again, hundreds of thousands of people, are you moral? Are you a hero? I'm just wondering, Now, also, another question I have before I get into, the nitty gritty of it. How much bad does a person have to do while they're alive to still be considered a bad person when they die? I'm just curious. I'm just asking questions. Not that the person I'm going to bring up here momentarily is on the same level of evil, but I think you'll get the parallel. We'll start off lighter and we'll get into the heavier stuff. Saddam Hussein, everybody considers him a bad person, still. They consider him a monster, still. He's been dead for a while. He did some good things. He did a lot of bad things. And overall, we consider him to be a bad person. Don't want to use Saddam Hussein? Okay. Osama bin Laden, same thing. I'm sure he did some good stuff at some point. We were his ally at one point, being the United States. We called him a freedom fighter. So he did a lot of bad stuff too. I think overall everybody kind of considers Osama bin Laden to be a bad guy, even though he's dead. Now, I also acknowledge that there is a separation because they're from another part of the world. So maybe that makes it easier to rationalize that they're bad people because they don't live here. I don't know. I'm asking. because my standard of a bad person doesn't change upon living or dying. So I say all that to say, I just gave y'all a nice little 5-minute intro. John McCain passed away this week. And what's upsetting about this is the amount of people who call themselves progressives, label themselves left-wing, who are just doing all this fawning admiration of him. It's like, really? Now, I don't like shitting on dead people. I don't think that's necessarily the right move, so I don't really want to speak ill of John McCain as a person. I don't really have anything bad to say about him as a person. However, his record is horrible. His record is that of a monster. His record is comparable to that of a Saddam Hussein or a Osama bin Laden. Now, granted, of course, he's not a dictator, so he didn't individually have the same power as them. I acknowledge that. Don't try to twist my words and say I'm equating John McCain with bin Laden. It's not what I'm doing. What I am saying, though, is if you look at his voting record, he supported every single military intervention, offensive, defensive, didn't matter. Every single one, he voted for it. Now, a lot of people give him a pass on that because he himself was a prisoner of war, and he did some admirable stuff while he was over there. He ended up, not taking a deal to get himself out of it. Basically, they could have sent him home because his dad was powerful, and he said, no, I'm gonna stay behind with my fellow soldiers until all of us get to go home. So that's admirable. I don't know too many people who would have did that. That's almost like the not snitching rule in the streets, where it's like everyone says that they're not a snitch and that, oh no, if we get caught, I would never tell on you, you're my bro and all of this. But as soon as they get caught, they start singing. John McCain actually was one of the real ones who said, no, I'm actually going to stay behind with my comrades until we can all get out of there. So that in itself is admirable. That does not erase the fact that he wanted to invade every other country that we've invaded and that we've attempted to invade. He was for all of it. Saudi Arabia, or not Saudi Arabia, because they're one of our big allies, but Yemen, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Libya, Niger, the places in South America that we've invaded. He's very pro-war. Well, he was very pro-war. Now, the reason I say, I bring it up in the context that I bring it up in, when I say, hey, anybody who advocates for the murder of hundreds of thousands of people, are they a hero? Because that's literally what he did. So, I just find it very interesting that purely because he died, all of a sudden people are just whitewashing history. Bernie Sanders, he talked about how he was his friend and how, he's always been a man of integrity and honorable. Was he a man of integrity all those times in the 80s and those 2 different times in the 90s where he voted against Martin Luther King Day being a recognized holiday? Because he did that at least 5 times. 5 different votes. He said no every time. Is that something a hero would do? Is that something that a man of integrity would do? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had a bunch of flowery words and language for him on Twitter. And I get it, you're new, so you have to toe the line essentially, because you are in a new position and you, I'm sure, want to gain some sort of favorability. You don't want to come out immediately with a bigger target on your back than is already there. So I didn't like seeing that, but I understand where it comes from. But you have all these people who we would consider strong progressives who are just saying so much nice stuff about him. And my thing is, you can say we appreciate your service for the country. I'm sorry to your family for the loss. Rest in peace. Keep it at that. Stop adding all this extra stuff. Because if people said those things about Bin Laden or Saddam Hussein, we'd be furious. We'd be like, what? No, this dude was a monster. He advocated for killing a bunch of people. He participated in the killing of way too many people. He was a bad guy. He was a monster. All I say is keep the same energy. That's it. That's all I'm saying. Keep the same energy. I'm not saying disrespect him now that he's gone. I'm not saying be evil. I'm not saying go after his family. I'm not saying any of that. Like, in my opinion, you know, y'all hear me all the time. I talk about Jimmy Dore and Kyle Kulinski a lot on my show. Jimmy Dore, my opinion, going a little too far. I get the sentiment 100%. Jimmy Dore is keeping the exact same energy as when John McCain was alive. However, I think he, you know, granted he's a comedian, you know, so take that with a grain of salt, you know, but at the end of the day, do I think he's going a little too far? Sure. Not gonna make me stop watching the show. I'm gonna watch those segments and everything because there's so much truth in them. But my issue with the whole thing is, let's not pretend like these people are good people just because they die. There's a difference between not shitting on somebody when they're dead and over the top praising them when they don't deserve it. Just because people die does not erase their history. So, you know, I just wish, like, we could use this moment to, you know, like, another thing about John McCain. He stopped the repeal of Obamacare, so a lot of people give him credit for that as well. I also give him credit for that because things would have been way worse, a lot rougher without Obamacare, you know. There's already 30 million people that are uninsured. It would have definitely been more. So that was a good move, but let's paint the whole picture. John McCain was in the Senate, so that's one form of government health care. He was a veteran. That's two forms of government health care. Let's just stop there. You had two different forms of government health care to choose from. Let's ignore the fact that he was rich and could pay for whatever health care he wanted. Let's focus on that for a second. John McCain, you had two forms of government health care. You were one of the bigger advocates of a free market healthcare system, saying that the government is going to take over your healthcare if we get single payer, and the government needs to keep its hands off your medicine, and oh, you don't want socialized medicine, and yada yada yada, right? Everything that took care of his brain cancer treatment for the last year or 2 years or whatever it's been, I'm sure he was probably getting some supplemental health care as well too, because again, he is rich. But you had at least two. Jimmy Dore says three, but I'm gonna go with two for the two that I know. Senate, VA. You had two different forms of health care, and you were advocating against the exact form of health care that you were receiving. It seems to me that maybe the integrity that everybody's saying you have, or the, you know, the fierce independent spirit that you had. Bernie Sanders said that too. He represents independence. True independence would be bootstraps, right? Get it, you know, get it how you live. Meghan McCain, his daughter, she's not pulling herself up by her bootstraps. She's essentially being a lazy mooch, like you've accused other people who, quote unquote, receive handouts from the government. What's the difference between her receiving a handout from you and somebody who needs it getting a handout from the government, which isn't even really a handout? Like, what's the difference? I'm just asking. I had this conversation with somebody else. They said, it was somebody on Facebook, they said, because I was asking them to give me a good argument against free college. And their first argument was, well, I had to work 2 jobs in order to pay for school. So if I can do it, other people can. My response to that was, so why wouldn't you want to make it easier for the next generation because you had to work 2 jobs and go to school? That was extremely difficult. Why do you want the next generation to have to do the same thing? Our job is supposed to be to make it easier for the next generation to thrive, to survive, to all of these things. The next argument was free college makes people lazy because they don't have to pay for it. I immediately thought of my friend, my boy Spanish. Immediately thought of him. Because right now his wife is in school and is being paid for by the VA. So I brought it to him and I said, hey, do you think because you guys don't have to pay for school out of pocket, that makes your wife lazy? He said, no, of course. Like, I think there should be some standards, to get into school. But it costing an arm and a leg is ridiculous. And, no, of course it doesn't make her lazy just because her schooling is paid for. And I said, right, she's one of the more harder working people I know, actually. Every time I come over there and hang out with you, she's doing homework or studying or doing something related to school, and she works on top of that. So there's really no correlation in who pays for the schooling versus the work that it requires to be a good student. So that's just a bad argument. It's the same thing with Meghan McCain. You advocate for pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, do it yourself, don't rely on anybody, self-reliance. That's like one of the main right-wing talking points is self-reliance. Meghan McCain has never had to self-rely in her life, and she still won't. So I'm just saying, when you advocate for certain things, and then those same things come back around on you, you either prove that you have no principles, that you were selling out because of other reasons, and you realistically know that quote-unquote socialized medicine is actually the better way to go. You know that, and for some reason you're not allowed to say it. It might be that, or it could be the classic right-wing, oh, now that it affects me, I understand it. Just like with the torture. He was one of the main people against torture. I will give him credit for that as well. But the only reason is because he was tortured. Same thing with Dick Cheney. Totally against gay marriage. Find out his daughter's gay. Now he's for gay marriage. So what happens when... I'm going to end it out because I think you guys pretty much get my point. If you're a warmonger, if you advocate for policies for your entire life that help no one except for your rich donors and yourself and your family, but you ignore the little guy that you're supposed to be helping, and then you die, am I really supposed to feel bad? That's what I want to know. When you've done so much dirt, it's really hard for somebody to feel bad for you once you're not here anymore. Now, again, that's not me wishing that he's not here anymore. Like, I kind of just didn't really think about him after a while. Like, when I heard he got cancer, I was like, man, that's messed up. Like, brain cancer, that's a hell of a thing to deal with. And then I moved right along with my day. Because if I had brain cancer, guess who didn't want me to have access to that healthcare to get the treatments that he got? John McCain. So, I don't know, man. I wish people would keep it more real. Like I said, you don't have to shit on the guy. That makes sense. I understand. You don't want to speak ill of the dead. Completely understand it. That's a very respectful move. But let's be real. Stop acting like he's a hero. Stop acting like he was this wonderful guy who, advocated for policies that would help everyone, and, he'll truly be missed. And stop it. Just stop it. Bernie, stop. Alexandria, stop. That's all. That's it. Just stop. Stop with the nonsense. Like, you don't have to go over the top. just to prove that you're not a bad person. Like, oh, he's on the right, I'm on the left, so maybe if I say all this extra good stuff about him, it'll make me look good. Like, no, it just makes you look dishonest. If you go from 1 year saying I will never speak to this person, and I'll never forgive them for doing this. Like, I forgot what the guy's name was, but when you go from saying certain things, Obama, he said that John McCain and Sarah Palin are a direct line, which allowed for Trump to become president. Like, when you say stuff like that, and everyone knows how everyone feels about Donald Trump, so you're basically saying John McCain opened the door for a Trump to become president. He's a hero? I'm just saying. You guys tell me what a definition of a hero is. How many thousands of people are you allowed to contribute to their deaths before you're no longer a hero? Just because they're overseas and they have a different religion than most of the people here, why does that make it okay? If Vladimir Putin started bombing the United States as much as we bomb other countries, are we gonna look at Putin like, yeah, man, I mean, he did some messed up stuff, but overall he was good. Like, he meant well. Because that's what people are doing with John McCain. They're like, oh, well, he meant well, so give him a pass on all the messed up stuff, basically. Or saying it was a mistake. Like, no. None of that's true. I'm not giving him a pass. In life or in death. No, you made horrible decisions that led to a lot of people dying. A lot of people not having access to the healthcare that they need because they were sick and they couldn't afford it. John McCain voted with Donald Trump over 83% of the time. So all of this, he's a hero because he hates Trump stuff, that's not even a good excuse. Yeah, they used to go at it publicly, but at the end of the day, a lot of Trump's agenda, McCain agreed with it. Tax cuts, of course. And then the tax cuts, voting for that essentially made it so that Obamacare is null and void. Because there's so many executive orders that Donald Trump's done, and so many provisions that were slipped into the tax cuts that basically just gut Obamacare without saying that it's gone. So even though you voted to not repeal Obamacare during that, showman type of thing that you did with the big thumbs down and having everybody cheer for you and all that good stuff, that's what it was. It was for show. That was a showman's thing, because once you voted for the tax cuts, all that stuff that you just voted to keep into place got repealed anyway. Obamacare basically only exists in name now. And John McCain is part of why that is. So again, I just want to keep everything in perspective here. If you want to call him a hero because he didn't sell his people out in Vietnam, that is heroic. I'll give you that. But if we paint the whole picture, if he was not an American, would you consider him a hero? Put John McCain in any other country, did the same stuff, would you consider him a hero? And don't put him in Saudi Arabia, those are our allies. Put him in Russia, put him in China, put him in Syria, put him in Iran. And then ask yourself, would we consider that person to be a hero still? I think I've made my point. If this comes off insensitive, maybe you should live a better life while you're here and make better decisions and actually try to help people. Don't get in government for self-aggrandizing reasons and just for your own ego. I'm not saying he did, but you know, the point of being in government is supposed to be public service. So if what you're doing is not serving the public or it's detrimental to the public, I'm going to speak on it whether you're alive or you're not. When George W. Bush dies, I'm still going to call him a terrible president, because he was. That's not going to go away just because he dies. You know, what are we doing? If you're a bad guy when you're alive, you're a bad guy when you die. Again, that doesn't mean shit on him. Me even saying he's a bad guy, people are probably going to say, oh, you're shitting on him. Like, you just said you wouldn't disrespect the dead. No, I'm pointing out that if anybody else, like, let's say he's still alive. Like, let's say he didn't pass away. Somebody's walking around the earth who advocates for all these wars that end up killing hundreds of thousands of people. We're gonna say something about that guy while he's alive. What changes other than the fact that he's not breathing anymore about his actions? So it is what it is, man. I don't really have too much more. I just wanted to make sure, first of all, to get an episode out, just because you know, we're on that 2-week grind. Shout out to my man C Wood. You can follow him on Instagram and Twitter at classic_wood. Do not forget that underscore. You can follow me on Twitter at ShaneG_MWC. That stands for Midwest Coast. You can also follow me on Instagram at ShaneG_Midwest Coast. If you find me on Facebook, cool. If you find me on Snap, cool. But the Facebook page is the Midwest Coast Podcast, and the YouTube channel, Midwest Coast Politics. Appreciate y'all for listening. You know, like, share, subscribe. If you subscribe to this on Apple Podcasts, then you've already been a member, or I'm not a member, but if you've already been a subscriber, then you can go back and you can listen to every episode. As long as you've been subscribed for a while now, everything's there. If you're a new subscriber, you'll probably only hear this one, maybe the last one as well, just until, you know, we get it all together. That's all I got for y'all, though. You know, peace. Hope everybody has a good week. Hope your jobs are going well. I wish everybody much success, you know, and don't be a shitty person when you're alive, and then I won't have to make half-hour podcasts about you in your death.